the streets to the skies, and we'll break them chains.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going exploring this whole world of cryptocurrency, and specifically its relationship with the Black community. It's pretty fascinating stuff. There's a lot of hope, also a good bit of skepticism. And we're really trying to get to the bottom of this whole search for financial equity. We've got a ton of research analyses from places like the Federal Reserve, the Institute for New Economic Thinking, and even articles from media outlets that are really tuned into what's going on within the Black community.
Yeah, it's a really complex landscape. And I think to really grasp what's happening, we need to understand the history behind it all.
Totally. Okay, so let's start with the big question. Why is cryptocurrency so appealing to Black investors? I mean, it is super volatile. There's a lot of risk. But we keep hearing about this idea of empowerment, like it's a way to kind of break free from a system that hasn't always been fair.
You're absolutely right. And there's data to back that up. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, they found that Black consumers are actually more likely to own cryptocurrency than they are to own stocks. That's a huge difference from how people usually invest. I think it shows just how much people are looking for new ways to build wealth.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the history of financial exclusion in this country, things like redlining, predatory lending practices, it makes sense that there would be some mistrust towards traditional institutions.
Exactly. I mean, think about what happened with the Freedmen's Savings Bank back in 1874. That was devastating for Black communities, not just the financial losses, but it was this huge breach of trust.
Right. So then this new technology comes along, blockchain, this decentralized system. It promises more control, more transparency. It's no wonder it resonated with people, especially younger generations who are already so plugged into the digital world.
Yeah, you're totally right. Especially Black millennials. They grew up with technology. They see the potential of blockchain beyond just cryptocurrency. Things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They're a way to own and trade digital assets. And then there are DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. It's like an internet co-op, where communities can pool resources and make decisions together.
Right. So it's not just the tech itself. There's like this cultural wave driving this too. You see Black celebrities and athletes promoting crypto. Jay-Z had his Bitcoin Academy. LeBron James partnered with Crypto.com. That kind of visibility has to have an impact.
It definitely does. It creates excitement. It helps people who might not have felt welcome in traditional financial spaces see that there are other options out there.
Okay. But with any investment, especially one that's new and volatile like crypto, there are risks. We saw it with the 2022 crypto winter and those high-profile crashes like FTX.
Yeah, that was a wake-up call for a lot of people. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of making quick money, but we have to remember what happened during the 2008 mortgage crisis.
You mean when people were promised the American dream through homeownership, only to end up trapped in risky subprime loans?
Exactly. It shows how quickly things can go wrong.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson. Do you think the people who are hoping for fast gains in the crypto market were especially vulnerable to those downturns?
That's something researchers are concerned about. Studies from Ariel Investments and Charles Schwab, they found that a larger percentage of Black investors expected big returns from cryptocurrency compared to white investors. That optimism is understandable, but it could make people more likely to fall for scams or take bigger risks.
And it's a lot to navigate. There's not much regulation. New projects are popping up all the time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wild west out there. It's really hard to know what's legitimate and what's a scam. And then there are the practical risks. What if you forget the password to your crypto wallet? Or the exchange where you're storing your crypto collapses, like what happened with FTX.
It's kind of scary to think about, losing everything because of a forgotten password, or because a platform shuts down. Makes you realize that even though the technology is so promising, there are real vulnerabilities too.
Right, and it brings up this bigger question. How does cryptocurrency fit into the bigger picture of wealth inequality in America?
That's a really important point. We can't just talk about crypto in a vacuum.
Exactly. This ties into this much deeper issue of wealth inequality. Economists like Derek Hamilton, they've been talking about these disparities for years. We have to look at crypto through that lens.
I remember reading a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. They found that the top 1,000 Bitcoin investors control a massive amount of the wealth in that market. Doesn't that kind of contradict the whole idea of decentralization and financial equity? That crypto was supposed to be all about.
That's the irony. Some people thought cryptocurrency could help level the playing field, but it might actually end up making those inequalities even worse.
It's almost like we're recreating the same patterns of exclusion and disparity, just in this new digital space. And it's especially troubling because so many people in the Black community were drawn to crypto. hoping it would be a way out of those systems of inequality.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation. Remember that Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City report about how black households have a much lower homeownership rate compared to white households? That's a clear example of the systemic barriers that are still preventing black families from building wealth.
So it's like this vicious cycle. Systemic barriers make it harder to build wealth. So people look for alternative paths. But those paths might just end up reinforcing the same inequalities. How do we break out of that?
It's going to take a lot of work. We need to address the root causes of these disparities, things like access to quality education, affordable housing, job training programs. Those are the things that will create real economic security. And without them, any gains people make through investments, whether in traditional markets or in crypto, they might just be temporary.
So it's not just about crypto. It's about this bigger conversation about racial justice and economic empowerment.
Exactly.
And speaking of bigger conversations, what about the role of government and regulation? We've seen some efforts from the U.S. government, President Biden's executive order on cryptocurrency. There's been talk about new legislation. But do you think those efforts are enough?
Well, it seems like things are moving pretty slowly. And there's this concern about the influence of crypto lobbying on politicians.
Yeah, I read a study from the Institute for New Economic Thinking about all the campaign contributions coming from big names in the crypto world, like Sam Bankman-Fried. That kind of influence can really slow down any meaningful reform.
Definitely something to be cautious about. The whole regulatory landscape is still up in the air. But on top of all that, financial literacy is so important, especially in the Black community, where there's been this long history of financial exclusion and exploitation. People need the knowledge and the tools to make smart decisions about their money.
That's true. But what does financial literacy even mean when we're talking about something as complicated as cryptocurrency? It's not like just learning how to balance a checkbook.
Right. It's about understanding the technology, knowing the risks, being able to spot scams, and understanding that chasing quick returns can be dangerous. It's about thinking long term, diversifying your investments, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
So it's not just about learning about crypto. It's about developing a whole financial mindset.
Yes, a mindset that emphasizes critical thinking and risk assessment.
That makes sense.
And that's why things like the Black Blockchain Summit at Howard University are so important. They're creating spaces for people to learn, to talk about these issues, to connect with each other. They're helping people navigate this complex landscape.
So it's about community building and making this technology accessible to everyone.
Yeah, it's about taking control of the narrative, building a more inclusive and equitable future in this digital space.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the potential of crypto as a way to achieve financial equity, to the risk, the complexities, and the whole context of systemic inequality. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm wondering, is cryptocurrency really the answer to the challenges that Black communities have been facing for generations?
That's a really tough question. Technology alone can't fix deep-rooted social and economic problems, but when it's combined with a commitment to justice and equity, it can be a powerful tool for change.
So it's not a silver bullet, but it's one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Exactly. It's about addressing financial exclusion, building a more inclusive and equitable society, and empowering individuals with the knowledge and resources they need to thrive.
That's a good place to leave it for now. We'll continue this deep dive in our next episode. But for now, we want to leave you with some food for thought. We've been talking about, the potential for crypto to kind of level the playing field. But is it possible that it could actually end up, reinforcing existing inequalities?
That's definitely a risk. And it's something we need to be really aware of. A lot of people were drawn to crypto because they were looking for a way to break free from a system that they felt had failed them. But if we're not careful, we could just end up recreating those same power dynamics in this new digital space.
It's almost like we're taking these old systems of oppression and we're just slapping a shiny new tech veneer on them and call it progress.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to think critically about these issues, to not just get swept up in the hype, but to really ask ourselves who benefits from this technology and who's being left behind.
So what can we do to make sure that crypto doesn't just become another tool for the rich to get richer?
Well, for one thing, we need to make sure that everyone has access to the knowledge and resources they need to participate in this space. That means financial literacy programs, mentorship opportunities, and community support networks.
Right, because it's not enough to just throw technology at a problem and expect it to magically fix everything.
Exactly. We have to address the underlying systemic issues that are driving inequality in the first place. Things like access to education, affordable housing, and living wages.
Those are all really important factors. And it's clear that we need to be having these conversations about financial equity and inclusion on a much broader scale, not just within the crypto community, but in society as a whole.
Absolutely. And that includes talking about the role of government and regulation. We've seen some movement in that direction with things like President Biden's executive order on cryptocurrency and discussions about potential new legislation. But the question is, are those efforts enough?
Well, from what I've seen, progress is moving pretty slowly. And there's still a lot of concern about the influence of crypto lobbying on politicians.
Yeah, that's a real issue. We've seen how powerful the crypto industry can be and how much money they're willing to spend to protect their interests. So it's important to be skeptical and to hold our elected officials accountable.
That's a good point. So it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done, both in terms of education and advocacy.
Definitely. This is a complex issue with a lot of moving parts, but I think it's important to remember that ultimately this is about people. It's about creating a more just and equitable world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Well said. And I think that's a great message to leave our listeners with as we continue to explore this fascinating and ever-evolving world of cryptocurrency. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into crypto and, its impact on the Black community, I think it's important to just sort of sit with this question. What does the future hold?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think anybody can say for sure what's going to happen with crypto.
Right. Nobody's got a crystal ball. But I do think we can at least equip ourselves with knowledge, critical thinking skills, and a good dose of skepticism.
I totally agree, and I think that's why this conversation about financial literacy is so important. And it goes beyond just, understanding the technical stuff about blockchain or, what's happening with NFTs and DAOs. It's really about understanding the whole financial system, the traditional one, and this new digital landscape that's emerging.
So it's about empowering people to make their own informed decisions, being savvy investors, and not falling for those, scams or promises of getting rich quick.
Exactly. It's realizing that there's no easy road to building wealth, and any investment, whether it's in crypto or traditional assets, it comes with risk.
Yeah, and I think a big takeaway for me from this deep dive is that while crypto might offer some new opportunities, it could also make existing inequalities even worse if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and it's why we need to approach this whole space with a critical eye, ask the tough questions and really hold those who are shaping this new financial world accountable.
So it's not about, blindly accepting or rejecting crypto. It's about engaging with it in a thoughtful and critical way.
Right. And recognizing that it's not just one thing. There's so many different perspectives and approaches and ways that people are using crypto.
So I guess as we try to navigate this, this ever-changing landscape, the most important thing is to stay informed, stay curious, and stay connected with those communities that are trying to create, a more equitable future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. This is an ongoing journey, and the conversation's just getting started.
Well said. And for all of you deep divers out there, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
From the streets to the skies, we'll break them chains.